Capablanca X3 is a very good collection of free books written by Capablanca about 100 years ago, because I think Chess Fundamental and the Primer of Chess were written around 1920, and my chess career was written later, probably in 1935, I think. In any case, we are speaking of books that are like 100 years old. And you could tell me, well, why do you want to show books that are 100 years old? Because I notice in the comments of many sections where amateurs and beginners ask, how should I continue? I read this book or I know the rules, what should I do next? Well, Primer of Chess and Chess Fundamental are the books that you should read if you know how to move the pieces and you want to know a little more, because they will help you to understand better chess. What did Capablanca say about learning chess? He said you need to learn it from the end, which means the end game. In this book, in Primer of Chess and Chess Fundamental, there are some games annotated by Capablanca, and in my chess career they are all about games by Capablanca, which are, however, in descriptive notation, while the games in the other two books, right, are in algebraic, so they are easier to learn. Okay, and so that's why you should buy a book like this, because I bought it maybe for $10. So it's like $3 a piece. And why? Because they are 100 years old. Honestly, they are even probably out of copyright, right? 100 years old. But the algebraic notation, the conversion has been made in 1994 by a different publisher. This is Everyman Chess, that now maybe doesn't exist anymore. I think it was Cardogan in that time, 1994. So this to give you some facts or some stuff. In any case, now I would like to show you a game from Chess Fundamentals. And the game is, here we go. This is the interesting part. In Chess Fundamental and Primer of Chess, at the end of the book, Capablanca puts some of his best games. And for best doesn't mean that he must win, because in many cases he puts some losses, but they are very educational, so that's why you need to read them, okay, and learn from them. And also you need over the board, because it's over the board that these games were played. And so he's teaching you a lot. Game number one from a Primer Chess is F.J. Marshall against J.R. Capablanca. It was one of the match games that they played in 1909. Marshall started with d4 and Capablanca played d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6, bishop g5, bishop e7, e3, and knight e4. Here Capablanca says, I had played this defense twice before in the match with good results, and although I lost this game, I still played it until the very last game, when I changed my tactics. The reason was my total lack of knowledge of the different variations in this opening, coupled with the fact that I knew that Dr. E. Lasker had been successful with it against Marshall himself in 1907. I thought that since Dr. Lasker had played it so often, it should be good. The object is to exchange a couple of pieces and, at the same time, to bring about a position full of possibilities and with promising chances of success once the endgame stage is reached. On general principles, it should be wrong, because the same knight is moved 3 times. So it says 1, 2, and then 3, and you are losing 3 tempi, right? Okay. Although it involves the exchange of 2 pieces, in reality the difficulty of this variation, as well as in nearly all the variations of the Queen's Gambit, lies in the slow development of Black's Queen Bishop. However, whether this variation can or cannot be safely played is a question still to be decided, and it is outside the scope of this book. I may add that at present my preference is for a different system of development, but it is not unlikely that I should sometime come back to this variation. So how did White continue? After knight e4, it took on e7, queen takes e7, and bishop d3. He says here c takes d5 is preferable for reason that we shall soon see. How did Black continue after bishop d3? He played knight takes c3, b takes c3, and now if you are Black you should start to think and decide what would you play, what would you play in this situation, because Capablanca played the following move, knight d7, but he says that this is not the right move. What is the right move here? He says now 8d takes c4 is a better way to develop the game, and gives the following line: bishop takes c4, b6, and is followed by bishop b7. This would give to this bishop a powerful range, and he says that for this variation see the 11th game of the match. So in the 11th game of the match Capablanca played so, right? And this tell you what? That also in the time, however, they were studying opening theory, because clearly if you have to play a match you need to improve, right, and find a better way. You need to understand where things went wrong. So you see, often they tell us that Botvinnik, the so-called patriarch of a modern Russian school, Soviet school, was the one that put this emphasis on analysis. But in reality you can see also on Capablanca and Alekhine, when he tried to get the war title from Capablanca, they really deeply analyzed their games. They didn't think that it wasn't such a thing that you shouldn't do. No, there is only one way to improve, and you need to analyze your game after you play in order to understand if there is an improvement, if something went wrong, and where it went wrong and why. Okay, so he played knight d7, but we know that for him the best move was d takes c4, with the idea of developing that bishop. Knight f3, and now again you might think that at this point you should play d takes c4. Well, is not good anymore. If you want to know why, pause the video and try to think for yourself, and then I will give you the variation. Okay? So pause the video and understand why d takes c4 is not good anymore, and we see it right away. Okay? D takes c4. White would continue with bishop takes c4, and now you continue with the idea that Capablanca said before, right? b6, because you want to play this, but it's not good anymore. Why? Because at this point there is bishop b5, no? and of course you cannot play bishop b7 because of this knight e5, and this is pinned. Okay, so that's kind of a big problem for black to solve. And of course you might go back but then you still have a big problem. Yeah, maybe you should have put a longer variation to explain why, but here you can see that it cannot castle easily anymore, and that's the problem. So let's return back. Okay, so we were at this point in which white played knight f3, and Capablanca tells us that the idea d takes e4, b6 and bishop b7 is not working anymore, and so he had to play castle. C takes d5, e takes d5. Queen b3, putting pressure on this that is unprotected and on this. Knight f6, defending the pawn d5. e4 and c5. This is obviously a very interesting move, right? Because you need to do something, since the next is this. Okay, so Capablanca says, played with the intention of obtaining the majority of pawns on the queen side. Yet it is doubtful whether this move is good, since it leaves black's queenside pawns disrupted in a way. The safer course would have been to play c6. So instead of this, it would have been c6, the move that he thinks black should have played. And how did white continue here? White continue with queen a3, because you see it blocks this because this is unprotected, right? So this is a very interesting move. And now you should pause the video and try to find what is the right move for black, because Capablanca thought that this moment was critical. Sometimes you see and this is why you should learn from watching games, because it's not always a question of having a brilliant tactic that ends up the game. It's in common situation like this that you need to learn how to decide what to play next. Okay, so do yourself a favor, pause the video, think for like 3 minutes, and then write down the reasons of why you would play what you would play. In this way you will learn chess also watching this video, that is a book review in reality, because I like to review books in order to give a chance to people like me that maybe don't have much money to know which books are worth to buy, and maybe which they can wait a little later because they could be out of their understanding or out of their money, right? Okay, so Capablanca made a mistake and played b6. This is a mistake because white will attack b6. Instead, he says, if I had to play this position nowadays, everybody would be a world champion in hindsight. I would simply play rook e8. Then, after queen takes c5, would follow with this, queen takes c5. And he thinks that he would regain the pawn. Why? Because knight d7, and how do you protect this, right? So he gets the pawn back, and that was the way to go for him. Notice that in this way also, this is obviously an isolated queen pawn, so not so good, but white has 1, 2 and 3 isolated pawns that can be a source of attack. Okay, now let's return back and see one thing. No? What happens if after rook e8 white plays d takes c5? And here it says, if instead white would play d takes c5, then bishop g4 would give black an excellent game. That's interesting. But here it doesn't give a line, okay? So we must understand why it gives black an excellent game. Now, let's return back to the game in which Capablanca played b6 instead. Okay, I think it was like this the position, and he played b6. Okay, after b6, white continued with a5, bishop b7, castle, queen c7, putting pressure on that, and rook fb1, and knight d7. Here, in this situation, there is an evaluation by Capablanca. He says black's position was bad and perhaps lost in any case, but the next move makes matters worse. So this move wasn't good. Why it wasn't good, and what was the move to play? It wasn't good because he says he never saw this move, bishop f5. This is interesting. So you see, often we just think about ourselves and we don't think what will be our opponent's next move. Instead, he said rook fb8 would have been much better for black. And here he says, if that loses, then any other move would lose as well. Obviously, Capablanca didn't have a computer, right, to know if that loses too, or if there was a way to salvage the position. And notice that the problem is also that these old books, that's why I told you don't spend too much money on them, because yes, it was probably translated in algebraic, so big effort, but in reality with with ChessBase to translate in algebraic is a second. But the problem is that nobody ever actually put Capablanca analysis under scrutiny in this book to know if it's right or not what he says, right? So that's kind of very, very important. Knight d7, and obviously, like Capablanca said, white played bishop f5. Here Capablanca says that he should have returned back on knight f6. Instead, he played rook fc8. Bishop takes d7, queen takes d7, a6. And this tells you already something, because this pawn is already advanced. This is going to be bad, because something must defend it. We will see that something is going to happen there. It's terrible. When you let something go so far, it's a big, big problem generally. Okay, so after a6, played bishop c6, d takes c5, b takes c5, queen takes c5, and now there is rook a b8. He says the game was lost, one move was good as another. Rook takes b8, rook takes b8, knight e5, and now there is queen f5, f4, and now Capablanca plays this move, rook b6, I don't know what he was thinking. Because maybe he was thinking to defend that, I don't know. I think you can guess what happened next, right? Because one of the things they should tell you is that when a pawn reaches the 6th rank is worth at least a rook. In this case, white played queen takes b6 and the game was over, right? It's terrible. But here white could have made a mistake. If you make this mistake, yes, you have a big problem, right? Because there is a rook b1. And how does he continue? Track, track, track. And here he must continue to give check, probably. So it's probably check. If he goes here, check. If he goes here, check. So it's becoming check, check, check up to the end. Instead, obviously, let's see what happened here. Instead, after this, obviously, you take back, right? And then it takes here, sorry, this is here. And then how do you give the perpetual check? You can't. And this is going to become a queen. So how do you stop that? Huh? Beautiful, beautiful game by Marshall. Because imagine, this is just 25 moves. So it's what is called a miniature. So I hope you enjoyed this game. It's really a beautiful game. As I told you, I got this book for like $10 because I know that there were all these games annotated by Capablanca, and a few months ago Grandmaster Kolovic said that he improved a lot just by watching Capablanca games and doing his own analysis while he was watching them, and he was watching them on a board. He wasn't watching them on chess base or on the screen, okay? So guys, I urge you to try to find a used book like I did of this and check the games over the board, because that will definitely improve your chess. Because if it improves Grandmaster Kolovic chess, for sure it can improve a club player level chess. Thank you very much for watching.